So this is day three. Nathan here's the reporting from the former United Kingdom. London is in ashes, and unruly drunks have begun inventing a rather painful game with pieces of the shard. The Kingdom of Mercia is demanding the pre-927 borders are drawn up, and Anik is arguing with Morpeth over who should be the true capital of Northumbria. Aurelian overlords have forbidden the speaking of French, German, Italian, Polish, or Spanish. The penalty is 12 hours listening to ABBA B-tracks. The troublesome Europhiles David Cameron and Jeremy Corbyn have been forced to commandeer the Great Drawbridge and begin the process of our Atlantic drift. As an obedient serf of the Dark Lord Zug, I have been called up to national service. We need to chip away the white cliffs of Dover by 6 p.m. Dark Lord Zug, furthermore, is holding a joust between Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, and Michael Gove. Whoever can run the entire length of Hadrian's Wall in 20 minutes will be our next Prime Minister. Stonehenge will become the new headquarters of GCHQ. All seagulls will have to be tested to see if they're true British seagulls and not here to take our British jobs. All citizens must possess the full DVD collection of Little Britain. Okay, people. I'm not a comedian. That was my rather flimsy attempt at humour. But there is a purpose behind that. I'm trying to make the point that for those of us on the Remain side, and for many of our international friends, the last few days have been, let's face it, very pessimistic. Now, leading up to the referendum, this was a speculation that both sides were scaremongering. And what we're seeing now is the fruition of a certain degree of scaremongering. But there are legitimate concerns. I would just make a quick disclaimer. If you're on the Leave side and you're saying, oh, stop whinging, I don't quite agree with that. I think that people have a right to express concerns. I think that people have a right to ask questions and express the very real concerns that they have about all the things that are developing, and there is a lot of things developing. I don't think that's whinging, and bear in mind this only happened 2 3 days ago, so I don't think people can just dismiss it as whinging. Um, you know, you have the right to your views, and Remain people have the right to their views. I I voted Remain, as I said in the video, and I don't regret that decision. I think it was the right decision. However, I am trying to sort of look at some of the positive aspects of this. Now, that might seem like a strange thing to say because there are a lot of concerns, but there may be some positive aspects because the pound has fallen. It will make it harder for us to travel abroad, financially speaking. Those of us who are not that well off are going to find it a bit harder to travel abroad, at least for the time being. However, we will get more tourists here as the pound falls. I've seen a lot of Chinese nationals, for example, saying that they're going to come to Britain. And that's a good thing because they're therefore going to spend money. Tourists spend money. So that is going to help the economy recover in the short term. Um, there has been talk about Brexit plunging the world into a global recession. I'm no economist, but I don't think that's going to happen. Um, there is some important things to point out. We were in the European Union for 43 years. I'll say we are because the whole process is still ongoing. We haven't immediately left. There's still a lot of complicated meetings and so on to go through. We've been in the EU for 43 years. Now that's quite a while, but in the grand scheme of things, it is not that long. I mean, the British Union, that is, since the Act of Union, it is 309 years old. 1707 it began. So, 309 years of British Union is a lot longer than 43 years of being in the European Union. And as historian Dan Snow pointed out, we have been linked to mainland Europe way, 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 way back to the days of King Ethelstan. That's directly linked in terms of personal unions, personal royal unions, and so on. That's not including the migration from mainland Europe, which goes back millennia. We're not suddenly not Europeans. Okay, I get it. There's many Britons who wouldn't even consider themselves Europeans, but we are a European country, and that hasn't changed. As far as I'm concerned, it hasn't changed. I'm a European. we're still a European country. I do want to say something though to some of our international friends, especially from mainland Europe, who are being very pessimistic about Leave side. I voted Remain, but I do feel somewhat obliged to defend my compatriots in the way they voted. It is true that some people voted out of fear and ignorance. That is true. But there is genuine frustration at Brussels. And this is something that can be seen across Europe, not just in Britain. So to some of my fellow Europeans who are sort of dismissing the British as racist and so on, you're misguided. And that's an unfair generalization. But there is genuine frustration at some of the arrogance in Brussels, and I really do understand this. And at times when I honestly contemplated going for the Leave side, that was one of my main motivations in contemplating that. I've just seen a link where uh, President Juncker, i.e., of the Commission, actually said that elected heads of state listen too much to the people. Now, the EU is not a dictatorship in the conventional sense. It doesn't brutally, crush dissent and so on. But there is unquestionably an arrogance from the likes of Juncker that angers a lot of Europeans. And to Europhiles, I would say this is something that you can't ignore. Now, I'm a European and I'm a passionate believer in the concept of European unity, but I am not a passionate sycophant to the EU as an institution because I do think it has morphed into something quite different than what it was. So, in this regard, I genuinely have sympathy to Eurosceptics. Um, I definitely don't have sympathy for those who want to blame immigrants for all problems and they have a little England mindset. I find them embarrassing and nauseating. I've no time for them. Um, I'm outward looking. I believe we should be an open nation and all that, but I think people need to step back a little bit. The United Kingdom is not about to implode. In terms of Scotland, for those of us British Unionists who are worried about the imminent collapse of the United Kingdom, we need to calm down a little bit. I know Sturgeon is threatening this, but that's what the SNP always do. They want to do this before the entire pull-out negotiations are settled, so they want to do it within 2 years. Now, they're going to find it very difficult because the EU is not going to basically look at an autonomous nation of a larger nation and say, oh, well, we'll make an exception for you. Because in that case, they would have to do the same thing for Catalonia. Then Spain would obviously take issue with that. And Britain and Spain, despite the differences in Gibraltar, would find that they have united cause. And you might find growing Euroscepticism within Spain. You might find a similar situation if Corsicans try to break away from France and so on. And I'm not suggesting the desire is as strong there or the reality is as strong there. I think within the rest of Europe, Catalonia is the most likely. Um, and the Spanish aren't going to tolerate that. I would say there is also constitutional, legal, and practical cause for the United Kingdom government to simply say to the Scottish Nationals, no, we're not going to give you a second referendum. You got the first referendum. We gave the Scots a democratic voice. They made their decision. No, we're not going to do this. And why the hell should we? I ask you, what other country in the world would continuously allow itself to be internally divided in this way? They can't accuse Westminster of being dictatorial because if Westminster was dictatorial, Westminster wouldn't have granted the first Scottish independence referendum. If that was really the case, like the SNP and Scottish Nationals make out, then the dictator David Cameron would have sent in the troops to put down the pesky Scottish rebels. As we know, it didn't turn out that way. The Scottish people were given a referendum. None of the rest of us could vote in it, which I think is frankly rather dubious. But I think there is real cause to just say, no, no, we're not going to agree to a second referendum. You can complain and you can vilify Westminster all you want. Got the first referendum. This time, just no. I sometimes wonder, and this may sound bad, but I'm going to say it anyway. I sometimes wonder, do we maybe take a risk with absolute direct democracy all the time? I've been hearing that some people who voted Leave are now regretting that and they're Googling what the EU is. Now, if this is true, and it's on a significant scale, then that's not exactly a positive statement about direct democracy. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Democrat. I believe in letting people decide important issues, but there are many people who are saying that David Cameron made a grave mistake in putting a referendum to the British people about an institution the British people don't understand. The fact of the matter is, for about 30 years, we have been fed ferocious anti EU sentiments from our tabloids, and with the odd exception of The Guardian or The Independent, it's been overwhelmingly Eurosceptic. Now that's irrefutable. I'm just saying that to balance out this argument. Having said that, those of us on the Remain side need to listen to our compatriots and understand why they voted leave. And it's not a simple case of, oh, they're frightened of Romanians and Poles coming in and taking their jobs. There's a lot more reasons to it than that. And I would say to, you know, really, really hardline Europhiles, you're not being very open minded if you think the EU is an unquestionable institution. That's not open minded. You know, it's very, very possible to be pro EU without being sycophantic with the EU and without sort of saying, I agree with everything this institution does. I voted Remain, but I don't like some of the arrogance I see from Juncker and co. Though I would say to leave people, there are many powerful positions that are unelected. I mean, our Queen is unelected. Um, Rupert Murdoch has still massive power over the British press. He's obviously unelected. The top bankers are unelected. There's many powerful people who are unelected. Um, so that's just a few of my thoughts. But I would say we need to step back a little bit. There is an awful lot being said. There is a lot going on at once. Both major parties are in internal turmoil. We're going to have a new Tory leader and, in all likelihood, a new Labour leader. Incidentally, I think Hilary Benn may be in the running for that. He's a real Corbyn, critic, foe, so he would naturally be the anti-Corbyn choice. I think Andy Burnham might well go for another run. Um, it's going to be interesting what happens. Chuka Amuna might be a Europhile choice, but Chuka Amuna isn't going to get support in the north of England. Farage made a very interesting point where he said that he thought the Eurosceptic votes were won in the old Labour heartlands. Farage has always tried that to sort of delve into old Labour votes, which is quite a clever move, and a lot of right wing groups have done this. Um, are we going to see a rise in extreme parties? I don't know. I hope not. I was very disconcerted to see that footage last night of National Action, which are a bunch of neo-Nazi thugs having their demo in Newcastle, although that was in January. But I think, to be honest, groups like that really are on the fringes. I don't think we can really present them as being the norm. Um, anyway, that's a few of my thoughts. We need to step back. It really, really isn't as bad as some of the speculation that is out there. As for London becoming a city state, that's an interesting idea. I'm not sure how far that will go, but it is an interesting idea. London is, on the whole, a very pro EU city. Um, there's a lot of young professionals who would be pro EU. There's a lot of business people pro EU, and a lot of other Europeans living in London. Most of them will be pro EU. Not all of them, but most of them. Um, what else can I say? We also need to remember nothing is going to happen overnight. So, in the last 48 hours, we've had a prime minister resigning, internal chaos in both major parties, threats of breakaway referendums in Scotland and the United Ireland. All of this happening in a very short period of time. To be quite honest, I think all of it is going to take time. The first immediate thing that's going to happen is we're going to have a new prime minister, and that's hardly an unprecedented event. But whoever it is will probably have to call a general election sometime in 2017. Otherwise, Remain people will rightly point out, well, wait a second, you voted against an unelected EU, but we now have an unelected prime minister. So whether it be Boris Johnson or Michael Gove or someone else, I think they will logistically have to call a general election for sometime in early 2017, maybe even immediately. Um, who knows? I think Johnson has a chance of being prime minister anyway. He's popular across the country, so I don't think he would have anything to worry about. Um, Anyway, that's just a few of my thoughts. To my international friends, please, please don't think that Britain has suddenly become this closed little island that's hostile to foreigners. We're still an open nation. We will continue to be an open nation, and we'll continue to welcome people from around the world. Please don't think that you're not welcome here. If you're a tourist, if you want to come here to study or anything like that, you're still very much welcome. And I'm honestly not saying that out of hyperbole. It's the truth. Britain is not going to go away. Thanks for watching.